My name is Hanna. I'm going to be talking about growing and managing a remote workforce. And I'm operating from multiple computers here, because I just realized today that apparently I had to be on a PC, and I'm a Mac user, so bear with me. And anything that looks bad in my presentation, I blame PowerPoint and Microsoft. Moving on. That's not where I meant to go. So, I run a web hosting company called The Small Orange. We have about 35 people around the world, 25 of which have never probably seen your office, and another 10 of which who live kind of near our office but rarely visit. Before I was at The Small Orange, where I've been since March 2010, I ran customer service at HostGator, and I've done customer service consulting. I blog about customer service, or I used to blog about customer service at a blog called serviceuntitled.com. I'm at HostingCon. I was at WordCamp the other day. I live in Durham, North Carolina, where our office, or central gathering location is. Blue Devil fan, tech geek. That's kind of all that's maybe relevant about me right now. I want to know a little bit about the audience, though. So, first of all, who's who? Who is the CEO, president, benevolent dictator for life, etc.? All right, so mostly business managers of some sort. Anyone in like a customer service management role? A couple people. Anyone from HR? Okay, one HR person, cool. How many people have remote employees currently? Wow, okay. A fair amount of this presentation is trying to sell the remote workforce idea. I guess I don't have to do that. Of those who don't have remote employees, which is probably a very small minority, how many have had remote employees at one point, which would kind of indicate failure to have remote employees effectively? Okay. And then the final question before I move on is, who cares about their employees? Like, cares about their well-being, happiness, and a holistic sort of feel good at the end of the night? I love how not everyone's raising their hand. That's awesome. So if you don't raise your hands and you think your employees are just cogs in a profit-generating machine, that's okay. We'll have a chief capitalist medal for you at the end of the session. And I'm excited to be here to talk about this idea of remote working. And for those people who said, that they don't care about their employees, Karl Marx is watching. He's talking about something about the rise of the proletariat, and that was probably a poli-sci humor fail. So let's move on to I want to talk about maybe a more relevant, more current figure. And the Dalai Lama had this great quote that goes along the lines of, man, he was asked what surprised him most about humanity, and his answer was man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money. Crappy PowerPoint transition. Then he sacrifices his money to recuperate his health. And then, crappy PowerPoint transition, then he sacrifices that. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present, and it gets worse. And then the result being that he does not live in the present or the future, and he lives as if he is never going to die, and then dies having never really lived. It's pretty depressing. But the idea, and I know what you're thinking, you're probably thinking that your Facebook wall is a great place to find profound quotes, like this quote posted by our customer service manager a while ago. She probably doesn't remember that I got her to post this Facebook status so I could take a screenshot of it. The quote itself actually has kind of some profound implications if we think about our health and our happiness and our freedoms that we kind of sacrifice in order to earn the money that we then spend on things that make us happy, healthy, rich, etc., and ultimately free. And something to think about is that businesses take advantage of this to get their employees to work for them, and they do this often by getting people into an office. Businesses assume that it's better for them to have everything under one roof, under their supervision and under their control, the idea being that if we put our workers in a controlled environment where they can be monitored constantly, they'll be more productive for fear of consequences. It kind of is familiar like prison. Military does it, prisons do it, so does the traditional office. Remember, Marx is watching and judging you. But the difference is that, joking aside, you can leave, obviously, your employees can leave their current workplace if they're really unhappy, but they might be stuck in their jobs for other reasons. And businesses feel like they need to control people, and if employees aren't prisoners, then why do businesses kind of have this feeling that control is a necessity, and everyone needs to be controlled in order to be productive? And I think the important distinction between the traditional workplace and kind of the oppressive and Big Brother-esque and the new enlightened workplace that seems like many of the companies in this room have is that we have essentially an enlightened view of how we view our employees, and we think that we ideally like to hire workers with strong self-management skills who don't necessarily need a controlled environment, and they're able to accomplish their tasks with a professionalism through planning, integrity, all those good buzzwords. And it's hard though. When we post a job opening, we generally get somewhere to 100 to 200 applicants, and then we hire one person from that, and before offering someone a job, there's other things they have to go through, and it really takes a lot of time and resources, but we think it's worth it at the end of the day. So as an employer, you're probably wondering what's in it for you. So how is remote working beneficial to your bottom line? And you guys may have already noticed this, and if not, it's something to think about. Obviously, lower operating costs. We have a 1,500 square foot office in Durham for 35 people. If everyone, it's like maybe the size of this room, maybe a little smaller. We'd be hard pressed to fit 35 people with workstations and conference rooms and all that crap in an office our size. We can don't tell our existing employees, some of whom are in the room, we can get away with paying a little bit less because they definitely do trade-offs for being able to, they'll trade a little bit of money, which I think is very reasonable. I certainly have done it to have a better work-life balance and not have to deal with the commute. And then I think our best, and definitely the reason we continue to hire remote workers and even talk about it, is we have a far wider pool of talent to choose from. I've talked to a couple of people since I've been here about how easy or hard it is to recruit in certain areas, and it can be difficult. So this is where our employees are, all around the world. Most kind of by coincidence, not really intention. A lot of them seem to be along the eastern seaboard. I don't really know. Maybe it's easier to schedule the interviews or something. It's probably something very inconsequential like that has led to it. A couple people on the West Coast. We have a few people internationally. Croatia, great place. Don't steal our Croatian employees. We love them. And we've hired people really just based on where they've come from, and we don't even have to kind of get to that conversation of, oh, so where do you live and can you relocate, et cetera. So thinking about this, the average commute by car takes 25 minutes. The average commute by public transportation takes 48 minutes, and that's a lot of time that people are spending commuting. So our employees automatically gain 20% more free time by working from home, which I'm sure is a perk that many people would happily accept. And obviously lots of companies are doing kind of remote working. JetBlue has the same story of like stay-at-home moms in their kitchen taking airplane reservations. And apparently they save 20% per reservation by doing that and using this virtual call center. We struggle personally with doing phone support at home, but it's something we're working kind of towards and figuring out. And bigger companies have really embraced this too. So Sun Microsystems, they have 48% of their employees telecommute part-time and 6% telecommute full-time. And their savings, I guess because of their scale, have been to the tune of $387 million, which I think is pretty substantial, not even counting the work-life balance there. Another company that is really well known for its remote working is Cisco, where 90% of their employees telecommute at least some of the time, which is crazy. And what they've seen is they've seen $195 million in savings due to productivity increases. Essentially. And we have an employee, actually, his wife works at Cisco, and neither of them have to go into the office ever, so they're both home all day with their daughter, which is great. So they kind of benefit from lower cost of childcare, and they both get to work from home. It's kind of like the home of the future, I guess. So what's in it? Obviously, what's in it for the employees is all this extra time, more time with their friends and family. They work in environments that let them feel comfortable. I'm sure we have employees who work in their pajamas. We don't do a lot of video conferencing. I'll just say that. And that's fine. The phone works. It's no problem. And giving employees the freedom to work from home allows them to be closer to their families. So kind of the grind of the 40-hour work week doesn't have to lead to a disconnect, maybe between husband and wife, or wife and parent and child, or any of these other things. And also, obviously, people save a lot of money on gas. I ask people how much they save on gas, and it's generally like a $3,000 to $5,000, depending on how long their commute is. And also, a lot of our employees, if they're multi-family, if they're a two-parent household, they might only have one car, whereas previously they needed 2 cars. So if you're not convinced, which hopefully many of you are by now, I want to talk about kind of some of the things that will help overcome some of these ideas from a CEO's perspective. Managing a company filled with people you may have never seen, and I haven't met a lot of our employees, I've met quite a few of them, may seem like something of a nightmare for people, and on the surface it seems like there are far too many variables to manage and nobody wants to pay a staff to sit at home and play World of Warcraft or something. Then another question before we get into it. How many companies here have more than 50% of their staff that's remote? Fair number. And then probably the other half obviously has maybe a couple people that are remote. Does that kind of sound familiar? Okay. And we've been kind of successful in remote working overall, but it's definitely not been perfect. And I'm sure during the Q&A time, you guys will ask me questions that will lead to minor horror stories that we've dealt with. But there's a host of issues to stay mindful through each day, and employee performance is obviously only one of those concerns. So there are administrative and legal issues involved in hiring employees from different states. There's training, there's communication concerns, and the list goes on. And I want to take kind of the rest of our time now to break down some of the strategies that we've used and kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what makes remote working effective for us. So communication challenges is a huge one, and companies, regardless, they might have multiple physical locations and they have similar communication challenges to any company. So a lot of these are kind of general, but with remote employees specifically, some things we try and do is you need to make sure everyone has a very reliable way to stay in touch at all times, no matter what. And as you probably know, the key for web hosting in a lot of ways is organization. And an entity that is always in flux and never immune to outages or other problems, it's important that people can get in touch and stay in touch. So we use something called Jabber, like an open source chat protocol. A lot of companies use IRC. You could use something like Campfire too. And we use that kind of as our 24/7 water cooler. And some employees talk about fun things and talk about video games they play or their friends or whatever, and other employees just kind of stick strictly to work, and we don't really regulate it either way, and I think that's been an important part of encouraging employees to get to know each other on a personal level. We have quite a bit of transparency in employee scheduling, so most of our employees know obviously who's going to be on their shift and who's going to be working at the same time, whereas in larger organizations, when I was at HostGator, it was anyone's guess if you were a regular employee who else was going to be on shift with you, and they were big enough, it didn't really matter, but they didn't really need that transparency in scheduling because it was managed. The comprehensive online directory, we definitely have a couple ways where employees can get other people's contact information if needed. We use an internal WordPress blog to really communicate. We don't really use a lot of like newsletters or internal mailing lists, instead we use our WordPress blog. We call it Updates. There's a great theme from Automatic called P2, which is basically like Twitter in a free open source box. And if you want to pay for it, there's Yammer too. And then we use task management and scheduling apps. And if a lot of these sound like just kind of normal communication best practices, it's ideally because they are, or definitely give us other suggestions if they're not. Because in a lot of ways, and this is something I don't understand when people ask me about remote working, the way we manage our employees isn't substantially different from the way other companies manage their employees. Like, the only difference between what we do and what we did at HostGator is that HostGator, a couple times an hour, supervisors will walk around and talk to people and make sure that like they're on task and they don't have any questions, they're not stuck on a phone call from hell or something. But in terms of metrics that we track and all these other things, it's really almost the exact same as an in-person call center. The people just aren't there. And then kind of getting on to the security challenges, wrong PowerPoint, is important. Wow, transparency fail, sorry about that. And my computer looks better. But basically, it says you need to set and enforce really clear security expectations, and this is something that maybe an IT group would do in an office. So we've looked into providing all of our employees with kind of company-issued laptops that we can manage remotely. We haven't done it yet, but we think we're going to do it as we get larger, and that will allow us to really ensure that everyone is on the same platform, literally, and that everything stays up to date. We obviously have a VPN that a lot of companies, I'm sure, use, especially for anyone that might access the office out of work. And we kind of have a standard list of virus scanners and router security and all these other things that our employees should do. And we go over this with them in training and as they're brought on, and we kind of ask some of these questions ahead of time, especially this last one of ensure you always have a backup plan, or ensure everyone always has a backup plan. That's one of our standard kind of administrative interview questions is, do you have another reliable internet connection in case yours goes down? And a lot of the times, as long as the employee has the initiative to say, oh, I live near a Starbucks, that's fine, because ideally you're not going to be working out of there all the time, but definitely making sure your employees have some sort of reliable internet connection and or a phone that tethers or a wireless hotspot or something is really important. And then a lot of our employees, especially maybe our non-technical employees, aren't as aware of security, and in a remote work environment, it's definitely crucial. And something like web hosting, security is obviously essential to staying in business for any amount of time. So we definitely have to educate employees, and we definitely make it very clear that in kind of the usability security trade-off, we're going to always favor security, and that they kind of need to get used to that, and if they want to continue working from home. So again, it's not perfect, but it's something you have to do to ensure that you can stay in business and be effective. So who likes paperwork? Does anybody like paperwork? You like paperwork? Okay. He's going to do everyone's paperwork. Get in touch with him after the session. So if it's written here, if any, no offense to our HR person, if any hands went up, we'll assume you're in HR. But HR probably doesn't like paperwork either, and we certainly don't like it at our company. So one of the stickier features of running a remote business is dealing with all this paperwork and all these kind of HR regulations that are out there. And it can definitely be very complicated, and we've kind of tried a couple different things to address them. So how many people are familiar with one or both of these? I'm looking at a fellow competitor of ours. We kind of have copied playbooks on some of this stuff. So these are kind of two administrative payroll offerings that are beyond your standard payroll. So the main differences are it's an administrative services organization called an ASO, something to do with their company name, is essentially administrative and HR outsourcing. But the ultimate responsibility and kind of at the end of the day, if they screw up, it's your problem, because all the employees stay under your employee ID numbers. They're all technically employees of yours, etc. The benefit is, especially for web hosting companies that tend to employ a lot of young, healthy, very cheap to insure people, is that you can use your own insurance, and if you have very cheap insurance rates, you'll probably do better. As your organization gets larger and more diverse in terms of age and gender, those benefits are probably mostly go away. But at that point, you might want to consider switching to a PEO. And what a PEO is essentially all of my paycheck, technically, for my salary, technically comes from a company called ADP Total Source. And I'm technically an employee of ADP Total Source. There is no overlord at ADP Total Source that I go have my job review with, or that any of our other employees do. But legally and technically, that's how it works. And the benefit is that ADP is set up in all 50 states, and there are a number of companies that do this, ADP, Paychex, whoever. We've had great experience with ADP and really bad experience with Paychex, and I'll leave it at that. But what it essentially does is they handle everything, because everyone that works for you is technically their employee, so they have a very vested interest in making sure they don't screw up. You get to choose from their insurance offerings and all this other crap. But the long story short is that doing a PEO and to a lesser extent an ASO will really remove a lot of the paperwork burden from you, because now it doesn't matter where an employee lives. We click a button, we put in their information, and they're hired, and we don't have to go file tax paperwork or any of this other stuff that we'd have to do. I'm happy to talk more about this during Q&A if people really want to get into it. But the PEO has been a lifesaver for us, and in my opinion is absolutely essential if you have a lot of remote workers. And if you have like a large contingent of people at your office, you'll probably want to look into maybe setting up a separate corporation just for a PEO or something like that. But I'm sure it can be done. And we also try and keep our office as paperless as possible. So when we get mail, our administrative person who does come into our office regularly, she scans it to a service called OneHub, and then anyone in the company can access kind of relevant mail for them. And that makes things very handy. So instead of kind of having a file server at our office, we just put it in the cloud. So another thing is obviously wrong is to get reliable legal counsel. If you don't already, definitely make sure that you have someone familiar with your HR laws in different states, and there are definitely different lawyers who have different areas of expertise in this. If you have an on-site or on-team HR people, definitely utilize them. The nice thing, again, about ADP or a similar service is that you kind of have an HR generalist who's outsourced technically, but really gets to know you and your business. So they can help you out if you have any HR questions. So we don't have a full-time HR person, because we can kind of use those services from our payroll company. And definitely check, obviously, with your legal counsel or your HR people before you get into different state laws and some of these other problems. Because, for example, did you know that in California, and if you don't have employees in California, you might not know this, anytime they work over 8 hours in a day is overtime. Doesn't matter if they don't work the next 5 days. And there are just a bunch of things like this. Also in California, you have to pay out for any unused vacation time, which we don't in any of the other states we're in. So there is a huge labyrinth of various laws and procedures, some of which are better documented than others, that become a real pain to follow, especially if you're managing it all yourself. And ideally, qualified legal or HR counsel will help you with this. And like I was talking about earlier, if you have employees in California, definitely like check with your lawyer every time you talk to your employees or something, because it's a tough work environment there for employers. So in terms of performance challenges, which is kind of a common one, we track work output carefully and regularly. So just like I have in previous employers, we look at stats that employees are doing. And I guess maybe if someone's in your call center physically and their numbers are really bad, you assume they're sleeping or just staring at the screen or the cubicle or something. We maybe assume that they're watching Netflix, but really that's just semantics. Obviously the end goal is that they're being effective and that they're working hard. So we make sure that we're working and checking all the stats that we need to. We consider something, we're a smaller company relatively, and we've also really prided ourselves on service. So there's a lot of time when there might be only 1 or 2 tickets in the queue, but 20, or not 20, like 4 or 5 people working at a given time. So what we do is we kind of came up with a way where our employees had a very set way to use their free time, and we incentivize them. So our goals program and standard employee could have a goal along the lines of create some knowledge-based articles or write the script to do this or that. Essentially, it provides a way for employees to fill their free time, and that's been really helpful for us in kind of motivating employees. And it also has, this program specifically unrelated to remote working, has a great kind of salary negotiation upside. So anytime an employee comes to us and is like, I'd like a raise, we say, oh, are you participating in a goals program where you can make like, I don't know, like $2,000 a year? And most of the time the answer is no, because it's voluntary. And then you're like, oh, you should go do that, and end a salary negotiation. So that's unrelated to remote working, another topic in itself. And then another thing we need to do, especially given all the different state jurisdictions we operate in, is we need clear procedures to follow for underperformance. So we've looked into performance improvement plans, and obviously we do write-ups and all those other administrative things. But we have to make it very clear to our employees very early on that there are some things that if their performance is short of expectations, they need to think about. And then active and involved frontline supervisors is really important. And a lot of these sound like things that you do, again, in a normal call center, and it's because they are. There isn't a whole bunch of secret sauce here besides we use Skype, obviously, to talk to employees instead of doing it in person. And we have lots of screen sharing stuff. And I have a whole tech section kind of later in the presentation. Bringing employees on is PowerPoint is difficult. So this is what our hiring process looks like. And as I mentioned, we have about 100 to 200 applicants. How many people here use something like the Resumator or JobSite or one of its many competitors to manage their hiring process? Wow, not many. So sign up for that like now if you want. Basically, the Resumator is cheaper and JobSite is more expensive, but it will change your life in terms of how you manage your workflows. Of those people who said no, how many just manage your hiring process from emails coming in and sorting it out? Okay, so there's some disconnect here between what people do to manage their hiring processes. So what we love about the Resumator and JobSite and kind of any of the competitors that are pretty similar is that it really makes it very easy to create a process for your hiring process or your hiring procedures or whatever. That way, when someone applies, they apply online, they submit their resume, they submit any questions they might have, and then we can send them right through the interview process. And ideally now, with this multiple step interview process, we can get it completed within a day or two even. So if we're really on top of our game, we can get someone from application to offer if they're good within 1 or 2 days. So that's been a huge time saver for us and really helps us get quality people. And then it kind of provides a very clear template for our hiring process in general that we can tell candidates about. We post a wide variety of both local and national job boards. So we kind of have clusters of people, like in North Carolina where our office is, a couple of our managers live in Austin, Texas. So we'll post to those job boards in those areas when we want to, and we're really being aggressive. We have a data center location outside Detroit, so we'll post there too. But generally, we kind of just post wherever. Web hosting talk is pretty good, actually. And then we also have a pretty aggressive employee referral program. So we really encourage that our employees, mainly they poach them from their former employers, but we don't really care how that works. And they get us ideally good people joining our company, and then they get to enjoy all the things of ours. And obviously a part of that is you want to showcase your work environment, which is hopefully good, on your website and give an impression of what it's like to work for your company. So we want our potential hires to know what we have to offer them in terms of our culture, benefits, and so on. We think besides our remote working, that it sets us apart from our competitors that are trying to hire the same talent pool, essentially. In terms of training, we have to think about onboarding. I would say training is one of the more difficult things to tackle as a remote workforce. So something we think about is onboarding a remote staff member. No one's physically present to assist them with new software or explain the ins and outs of how to connect to our VPN or get this working or get that working. And that can definitely be a little challenging for less technical employees, so that's something we've had to think through. We've used TeamViewer for kind of screen sharing. There's also a couple, I think Skype does it. There are a whole bunch of different software solutions to do it, but we've had decent luck with that. We also bought GoToTraining, which is made by Citrix, the GoToMeeting people. It's reasonably good software, and it's certainly good for training people and kind of bringing them through the process. You need to make sure your new hires use compatible equipment. Our live chat software only works on Windows. We hire an employee with a Mac. It's like, that's going to be a problem. So we either have to buy them something like whatever Parallels calls its product or Fusion. And at the very least now, we just ask, do you have a Windows PC? And if you don't, we might want to work through that if they're worth it. If not, let's say you need to get one. We have an internal kind of intranet. We use the WordPress theme, and that works fine. But we also have a wiki. And we have that as a place that employees, new and existing employees, can go through to kind of find out all these different things about our company. And again, that's kind of the best practice that you want at any sort of support organization. Screen sharing I talked about, and always document the best practices. We always have employees posting on that company blog I was talking about earlier, where they're giving us insights into what works for them, and then our training manager, who's in charge of kind of the documentation and training, obviously, he'll take what they post on the blog, kind of fancy it up, and put it in our internal documentation. So those are all things that are important, and obviously, you want to keep your ears open to at all times for employees. I talk to all employees after 60 days, or a little bit before 60 days generally, about kind of how their onboarding process went, how the hiring process was, and if they have any feedback. And then just getting back to our hiring process, which I'm always curious to hear about companies' hiring processes. Obviously, we get lots of applications. We go through those looking for very basic qualifications, like, has this person probably seen a computer in the last 5 years? It's a little bit more stringent than that, but ideally, if they have some sort of web hosting or technical support experience, that's enough to get them a phone screen. Now we have some very basic technical questions, like, have you ever used cPanel? Have you ever built a website? Very basic things like that to see, like, okay, this person might be totally over their head, maybe they're not, but it's mainly focused on personality and customer service, and that's really important for us because, especially if it's a remote working environment, you want to get a feel for how these people fit in. Interview is technical skills. We set up a server or a VPS essentially that is broken, and then we kind of give them some tasks how to fix it. There are a bunch of ways that different companies do this, and generally some sort of technical interview is important to us, and we spend some time thinking about that. I interview all new candidates before we hire them, regardless of position, and then we have a trial. And my interview mainly focuses on customer service and culture fit and things like that. I assume by the time I talk to them, it's kind of been screened for the fundamentals of the job. And then trial period is essentially, we used to do contract to hire, which our legal counsel said we probably shouldn't do for most of our positions. And then trial period for us is a 60-day official trial period talked about in their offer letter. And essentially, it's less paperwork to fire them if they don't work out. Generally, by the time people get through this hiring process, which now takes less time than it used to, thankfully, it's generally pretty good. We don't end a whole lot of people at trial, and if it does, it always seems to be on day 61 they stop working out. So I don't know how to fix that. Someone has suggestions, I welcome them. Again, that didn't turn out too bad. So something to think about is obviously a remote work environment has some issues of of loneliness and all these other problems that make people sad and not wanting to be productive, happy customer service employees. So address those. We kind of have an informal policy that we should probably formalize of if you want to go meet with an employee that lives near you, and some of our employees do live near each other, the company will gladly pay for lunch or dinner or whatever. Don't go to like a Michelin 3-star restaurant. But beyond that, if you keep it reasonable, we'll gladly pay for it, and we like to facilitate that. A lot of our employees talk or interact after hours too. There are definitely some gaming things that go on, and a lot of our employees play video games, which is probably not uncommon in this industry. And we want to make sure that kind of our internal blog and our chat room and all this, we're trying to keep it informal, and that we're trying to keep it where people can get to know each other on a personal level. There is no physical water cooler or keg or however you do it at your company. So we want to encourage these interactions to take place kind of on work time as well. We encourage face-to-face meetings, and then we like to stay involved. So we do what we can to get people talking and to really encourage people to do something. Like one of our employees recently, she posted on our internal blog and was like, I'm a big fan of Harrison Ford. Did you know he's 70? He has all this post trivia that I didn't know about him, and then we gave someone movie tickets for the one that she didn't know. And you can just do little crap like that and encourage anyone and just empower anyone regardless of level to do that. Like no one asked, she didn't ask about that. She was like, okay, and then can we send movie tickets? And it was no problem. So things like that keep it interesting. And definitely a remote company, though it might sound like it, is not set it and forget it. I wish I could retire to a beach and not worry about it, or I could be like this person. But I can't, and just because the people are not there in front of me does not mean that they're not there and that they don't have the same issues and strengths and weaknesses and complaints and concerns that any other employee has. So definitely think about that, and think about you'll need to ascertain to kind of what is working and what doesn't, and oftentimes your employees will let you know. We also do employee satisfaction surveys, which has been important to us. So right now we kind of have the opportunity, many of us have already done it, a lot of companies here do not have remote work environments whatsoever. So I think we should continue to recognize the benefits and kind of think about these notions of independence and how we can not only sell remote working to, if you're not the CEO, to whoever is, but also thinking about selling it to your employees. A lot of our employees have not worked remotely before full time, and it's a little bit of a strange notion for them that you have to get people to get used to. So what we found is that it's increased, it saved us a lot of money, it's increased productivity, it's really helped us attract world-class talent, and it also gives our employees the freedom to be themselves. And that's kind of the majority of what I had. Here are my tech suggestions. So the ones in blue are the ones we use currently, and I'm told, I really hope that all this hassle with the presentation that they actually do post it. So hopefully it will be online. If it's not online in a couple days, I'll tweet it. My Twitter's at the end of it. So we use Jabber for our chat. We use Asana for our project management. We love Asana. Basecamp, we tried that. We tried Active Cloud. I've never heard of this other one. I think I was asking around for suggestions. Asana's pretty good. It works well for us in the way we think. T2 is great. I don't know how expensive Yammer is. I think it's not. They just got bought by Microsoft for $1 billion or something. So maybe it will be free now. But in the meantime, I don't think it is. And T2 is free and open source and WordPress powered, which is nice. So for our intranet, we also use WordPress, and all those run on top of a multi-site installation to make it easier to manage. And we use BossWiki, I think it's pronounced, and that's pretty good. Document sharing, we use OneHub. We actually use Google Docs a lot. A lot of our different employees use Google Docs. ShareFile is another one. Bamboo HR is awesome. So HR information systems are very expensive and terrible, but Bamboo HR is not. We love it. We joke that if only every part of our company could be Bamboo HR-like, we would never have to work because everything would just be perfect. It's like $3 an employee, so it's not that bad. Zoho People is kind of the less expensive, developed in 20-minute version of that. Hiring, we use the Resumator. JobBite was good too, it's just more expensive. And we use shift planning for kind of our time clock. It's okay. We've looked at other solutions. We haven't found one that we like better. And I'm happy to take questions. Thank you guys for listening. And I'll share the link on Twitter when I upload the slides ahead of time. And people that ask good questions, come see me after and I'll get your card and we'll mail you an ASO branded moleskin. My luggage was too full to bring them, otherwise you'd have instant gratification. So thank you guys, and I'll happy to take some questions. Yeah.
Do you have, in the US, do you have a minimum requirement of what people have to be in a workplace, even if it's at home? Desk, chair, computer, all that sort of stuff?
No, so we phrase it as they need a good computer and a reliable internet connection. Some people are into standing desks, some people want to work from their kitchen table. We don't really care. We don't do phone support right now, so I think as we move towards that direction, we're probably going to have to specify that you need like a quiet office or something like that. But for ticket support, it hasn't been a big deal. And some companies go more extreme with that than others, so that we haven't. Any other questions? Yeah.
Legally, and in terms of taxes, how do you handle the employees from South Africa and Europe?
So they invoice us as independent contractors, and they kind of handle it on their own. We looked at like some global payroll solutions, and they're good, but they're expensive. And we kind of have a couple employees in a couple countries, which was not economically efficient for that. If you have like 50 employees in one country, definitely do it. Because it's not that expensive then, but for our setup, it wasn't effective. And then another tax thing that you want to think about is that your accountants will probably freak out about when you tell them that this idea of nexus. So if there are employees in certain states, the accountants get very, very anxious about having to pay them money. Yeah.
Following on from that briefly, if you employ multiple people in the States, why don't you go down to kind of independent contracting?
Probably because we're based in the United States and they have greater jurisdiction over us. I think that's probably the short answer. And also, the solution for that was it was just much easier and more effective for what we needed. The independent contractor, definitely check with lawyers or HR on that, but they're probably going to, depending on the situation, they might object to that. I think there's a question from the fellow who spoke before me.
How concerned are you with your customers about having remote employees that don't come to the office? They ask questions about that?
We talk about it on our website as a bragging point about how it helps the environment. And I have never seen a customer. I think actually once we had a customer get really angry at us for having employees who work from home and had fun job titles, and we're like, you're probably not a fit for us. You might want to go to a more corporate coach. Sorry, but my knowledge is that it's never been a problem. Yeah.
How do you handle or I guess motivate people picking up tickets quickly and following the sun and all that stuff? How do you handle the ticket process with that kind of workforce?
Kind of similar to how any call center would handle it. So a lot of it's built into our help desk software that makes sure that like tickets are locked, and then we kind of have policies that you need to do it from oldest to newest. And in our environment, it's not really a problem because we reply to most of them pretty quickly. But a lot of that's driven by frontline supervisors, just to make sure that nothing is getting neglected. Yeah.
So my question is regarding the application of, we call this remote working. Could we also outsource it? Like it's your guys, you don't outsource that to another company that you can go to anywhere in the world where you could find cheaper staff, and it could be pretty much the same process, the same stuff you do.
Yeah, so I guess I'll challenge you on that as kind of a customer service guy. Outsourcing technically means, like you said, outsourcing it to non-badged employees. So
But your own, I mean, it could be your own.
yeah, I follow. They are our employees, and we do have employees in other countries. Our stance has been, again, we follow the talent. So if there's a more qualified employee in Croatia and that employee happens to be cheaper than an American, great. But generally, we would definitely, like we pass on people from India all the time because there are language barriers there in a lot of cases. And we definitely will hire based on qualifications. And
We do have people all around the world.
yeah, we do. We have a couple people in Eastern Europe, and but we also have one guy in England, which has a higher cost of living than most of our American employees, and another guy in South Africa, which is similar. And they actually they make just as much, if not more, than some of our U.S. employees. So again, we base it almost exclusively on quality of employee instead of cost of living. general culture fit, our general mantra with that is we're looking on the normal side of quirky, and the other side of quirky is weird, and we want to avoid that side. But on the positively quirky side, we're looking for people that are friendly and passionate and all these things, and we think that those translate into being able to work well with team members and being excited about their job. And generally what we find is that if the work environment is good and the people are good themselves, then ideally they should be able to kind of work well. And again, we hire for skill sets that would essentially work if our culture even had a call center. So if we had a huge call center, I don't think our interview questions would be much different because we're looking for the same kind of people. And we manage them as closely as I think any other environment would in terms of supervision and stuff like that. It's just we're at a size where we don't have supervisors in every single shift and stuff like that. But if I were at a 200-person company hiring remotely, I would ask pretty much the same questions because if you get quality people, it should translate regardless of geographic location. I think we have like time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yes, sir.
You mentioned your goals program. You've got 4 or 5 people sitting there twiddling their thumbs when there's no tickets going on. I'm assuming that's because at some point you discovered that they don't generally fill every time by creating knowledge base articles and all these things. So how do you incentivize that? You know, have you X number of articles equates to this?
So when they kind of define their goals, it's quarterly or monthly depending on the position. They say, I will create this number of articles or I will do this, and they set it out in advance. And we kind of assume that every shift will have some downtime. Some shifts have more, some shifts have less. And obviously, we're not staffing, so people have time to work on their goals. That's not our objective. But we kind of just assume with the SLAs we want, there's always going to be slower times, and that's just a cost we eat.
So you recommend people that those goals that they then...
If they set them in advance and they follow what they said in advance, yes. And then you had a question, I think. We mainly look at customer satisfaction metrics like we do kind of customer-wide net promoter scores, we do ticket-specific surveys. We look at kind of average response time as accurate as our help desk can tell us it is. And then we think about some of these metrics. So we track kind of work output and quality, but we generally track work output more in a sense that we just want to make sure they're kind of within a standard deviation of the mean, as opposed to that way if someone is playing World of Warcraft, hopefully their numbers would reflect that they're not working hard, whereas people who are working hard. But we don't reward some employees or think higher of some employees because they do 8 tickets an hour versus 7, because that's not the environment we have. And I think that's all the time we have. Okay, one last question. It's quick.
Curious, if you had anything go terribly wrong, do you think wouldn't have happened if you had an on-site employee?
Yes. We had an employee working for us and a competitor at the same time during the same shift. Our wonderful payroll company caught it, but it happened. And I don't think that's physically possible to be in 2 places at once and do a decent job. But I guess it could have happened maybe if he was in a loosely supervised call center. He could have been working another job remotely and been in one office. So it's different problems. We also don't have anyone throwing punches in our office that could happen in another call center. So you win some, you lose some. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. And I'll be around if you have any questions.